we got to about 82% of success with agentic AI. I think if I did Project Prometheus today, that would be closer to 92%.
Where did you find that AI was really dropping the ball or letting you down and couldn't be relied on?
I think when most people hear that, they might think that you are specifically referencing completing an appraisal. What is your view on it?
I do believe there's going to be need for less appraisers in the future, but there's going to be need for better appraisers in the future. And that means appraisers that are leveraging AI.
Episode 94 of the award-winning Market Moves with Mark and Jeff, two uninteresting guys talking about interesting times. Occasionally we bring on interesting guests, and this one in particular is so interesting that we just had to go ahead and hit record because we were jumping in early, Jeff, to conversations that I think the listeners would like to hear one way or another. Tell us who we got.
Yeah, it's a bit of a breath of fresh air to have somebody interesting, talking with us here, Mark. And so, yeah, like you say, it's easy to get down the path before hitting record. But someone that I've really looked up to and admired for a long time and listening to for a long time, feel like he is kind of one of the leaders in the space of appraisal podcasting and just sharing insight and information that really is interesting. So, Dustin Harris, the Appraiser Coach, welcome to Market Moves. We're excited to have you here with us today.
Jeff, thank you. We've been friends for a long time, and Mark, we've been friends for a short time, but very, very pleased to be on. Thank you. I'm honored to be here.
Well, we're excited to have you, Dustin. You do a lot of interesting, fun things. You're willing to do that out in the open, kind of space generally, and I mean, I remember from the early days of you getting started, listening to you talking on a podcast while typing out appraisal reports and stuff, and never, envisioned a future of inviting you onto one. But I found that as Mark and I have gone down the path with this podcast, there are definitely some parallels as far as just trying to understand what are true principles, what's really happening out there, and how can we internalize that and then apply it in meaningful and hopefully commercially viable ways, as you try to understand and then, make those applications. And so we thought it'd be fun to have a conversation with you, but I just wanted to offer that setup because it's been probably a long time in the making in some ways for me.
I love it, Jeff. Yeah, it's great to be here. I love your show. I'm glad to have more and more voices all the time out there because, part of our responsibility as appraisers is the public trust. And I think that shows like this, like what you and Mark have, are important to get that information out, to help them understand that there's a difference between jumping on the computer and getting a number and entrusting an expert. And by putting yourself out there, you become known and become known as that expert.
Well, we have been trying to find the right spot to send out the invite, Dustin, and you had recently published an article in Appraisal Buzz discussing the Project Prometheus, which is an AI endeavor, and we'll get into that. But please go read that to the listeners here in Appraisal Buzz. And so that was kind of the impetus here for us to reach out to you to kind of talk a little bit about that. But I think there is first some larger discussions that are very frequent in the Market Moves podcast that I can tell that you are contemplating constantly. You lead a group of appraisers. Not just in your podcast streams, but also masterminds, and you've got retreats and all sorts of fun things that are out there. But I'm sure that you feel the same pull that we do, which is how to make sense of all of this change with artificial intelligence. What does it mean for us as appraisers, as humans raising kids, guiding into college? It's like all of this stuff. And so I think it would be good to take a little bit of time here just to bat around the concept of where we are today, from your perspective, both in the profession and just generally.
Yeah, it's a great question, Mark. Great setup. By the way, Jeff Bezos stole the name Project Prometheus from me. Didn't even call me, didn't even ask me. But let me just set it up the answer to your question. I'm not avoiding it, but just getting to it, to let people know a little bit about what Project Prometheus was, because I think the project in and of itself somewhat started to answer the question. And just to be fair, there's no answer to the question. We can only surmise and guess. Jump out the old crystal ball back here and guess as to what the future looks like and where we are, because that where we are is changing on a day-to-day basis when it comes to AI. Project Prometheus was an experiment, and the experiment was basically, are we at the level now with agentic AI that a back office can be run completely by AI? Now, I want to be clear, there was a little bit of confusion up front with what it is, because I got a little bit of backlash from people saying, are you trying to replace the appraiser? No, the whole point of the project was to say, can you be the expert in that seat and get rid of the tier 1, tier 2 stuff in your office, the communication side, the front office, the back office, the research, the data entry, that kind of thing. You're still fully in control as an appraiser, but can you do so without support staff? And that starts to answer your question as to where we are and where we're going. And I will say that in general, we are at the point now where agentic AI can and does support a lot of what the appraiser does. Can it completely replace your back office? I think it depends on where you are as an appraiser. And honestly, in the last couple of weeks, guys, we had a new model come out that from Anthropic, and we've got other models coming out all of the time from OpenAI and Grok and Gemini that are mind-blowing, meaning the experience that I had with Project Prometheus, I call it the 82% rule. We got to about 82% of success with agentic AI. I think if I did Project Prometheus today, that would be closer to 92%.
Wow. So Dustin, that's certainly mirroring the experience that we're seeing as we're running some tests as well. I'd love to know, what do you see? What were some of the things that 82% of the time it was doing really well that you quickly could let go of the reins of or didn't have to worry about? Yeah,
it's a good question. So ultimately, what we found is that I'm not letting my staff go anytime soon. But about a month into Project Prometheus, when I was starting to build tools and implement them into our office, as well as our anonymous appraiser, this was a real appraiser doing real work. But at my bidding, I asked her to remain anonymous. I didn't want there to be any kind of backlash from naysayers or people that are thinking that I'm out there to destroy the world of appraising, and so therefore vicariously they're going to destroy her. So we called her Pandora, and Pandora and I worked side by side to where we were building tools and implementing them in her office and my office simultaneously. And about a month into this, I had a conversation with my 10-year veteran office manager. She didn't say the words, but she might as well have said the words, "Are you replacing me?" And I said, calm down. It's okay. I don't think that's going to happen. But she could see that we were starting to replace things that she was doing on a day-to-day basis. Now, I presented it to her as, hey, look at this cool tool that will help you to be more efficient and more effective. And she looked at it as, that's what I do. That's what you pay me to do. What am I going to do now? And ultimately, we came to the decision that, at least in my office, we are promoting all of our people to AI engineer, AI director. Therefore, they still have a job. It's just elevated and different than the job that they had before. Let AI do what AI does best and keep the human in the loop.
I love it. And I think about that, I mean, there's examples of this throughout history where you have some big technological lift that's coming, and everybody, I mean, you can go back and research articles, from centuries ago with the railroad coming on or whichever, where people are arguing that what is everybody going to do now? It's total disaster. And in each case, the human nature generally is, I can do more now with this tool. And that's really what happens with all of these folks, and certainly applies to like office managers and assistants and wherever else in the process. Like, good, now this is taken care of. I can focus my efforts on X, Y, and Z, or I can just now take care of a lot more files than I could before, one way or another. So it seems like, I think generally, and I think it's important to say off the cuff, that this is also true of appraisers, but this is the underlying philosophy of this tech, is that, how do we make our A players, exponentially more impactful in what they do?
Yeah, there's a lot of talk out there, Mark, about how AI is going to replace, white collar jobs and eventually blue collar jobs as the robots come on board, and absolutely that's going to happen, right? Absolutely that's going to happen. But I believe personally that I don't see a world where we're out of work in the future. I see a world where all of us, if we harness the power that AI can give us, is there's more opportunity out there. I literally, and this is not an exaggeration, guys, and first of all, I've got a disease. I'm a serial entrepreneur. I am a shiny object syndrome seeker. I'm constantly chasing squirrels, and I would say daily there's probably at least 3, and I'm going to use the word purposely, viable business ideas that come across my desk that could be made with AI, could be made better with AI. In the old days, if you wanted to try a new business, even a simple business, it took capital, it took time, it took blood, sweat, and tears, right? Today, you can literally spin up a job, a business, a experiment, if you will, in the afternoon. And by the next day, know whether or not it's going to be a viable business or not. I think more and more opportunity is coming to individuals who harness AI. It's so much. In fact, I've been famous for stealing. I never think of a original thought in my life, but I steal other people's ideas, and one of these is stolen from others who are saying this out there, and I would say that its application for appraisers is as real as anything, and that is that I don't believe that AI is going to replace appraisers, but I do believe that AI will replace appraisers who are not using AI.
Yeah. Jeff, I've got a quote from Jack Dorsey from a couple of days ago that I think is generally applicable to this, and I think probably describes specifically where appraisers land in this AI loop, but I think where most do, and it's a little bit of this agentic stuff. I don't know if you can get to it or not.
I think I can.
If you can't, I can read it. It's like 4 words, but yeah, it is AI fed, human finished. And this of course is referencing like how you'd raise beef, grass fed or whatever it is. I don't know, right, but I think like generally speaking, this human in the loop, but using the tool to just be better, to be more efficient. And as it relates to appraisal, these are not necessarily new ideas. You've been part of big firms. Our firm, Acurity. I mean, we have been producing 4 or 5 times the daily output of an appraiser well before AI, not intending to skip any steps at all. We couldn't do that, but it's just using kind of a tech forward approach and becoming experts in the process of completing an appraisal from start to finish. And, and so now those efforts get easier because the tools are much, much more readily available.
Yeah. Speaking of quotes, if you don't mind, I'm going to share with you a quote that came from one of our members actually yesterday. I was discussing this with one of my members. He says, so you can tell your friend that it's akin to the red pill versus the blue pill in the Matrix, right? If she takes the blue pill, her life will be completely changed for the better. Of course, this is speaking of AI, right? Things she couldn't even imagine will become reality, but if she ever stops, she'll become a crackhead, right? So the other quote is I think we are screwed if we lose it, meaning AI. This is an individual who is part of our membership. So we currently have what we call the Appraiser AI Academy and the Appraiser AI Architects. The Academy is a learning incubator where we get together a couple of times a month to learn AI together as appraisers. The Architects is where we meet together quarterly in person to actually build together. Bring your laptops, open them up. We spend the entire day workshopping AI. What's new? What can we build? Sharing tools and that kind of thing. So this is an individual who has taken and run with that membership, meaning he is an individual who has built out tools in his office. And the conversation, the reason this quote came up is he was talking about the amazing thing of AI. We talked about how recently there was a model banned for a period of time by the government. And it was one model. But his point was if AI were taken out of the loop right now, he was talking about the number of appraisals that he could do with AI versus without. And he said the volume, the level that we are at with AI, and he has fired nobody. In fact, he's hired more people, right? As AI has come on, he's been able to grow his firm even bigger. And consequently, he says, if AI was taken out of that loop, I'd be screwed. Meaning I am completely now dependent. My SOPs are completely dependent on AI and how it can make me more efficient.
Well, it's such a natural evolution in my mind, Dustin, of what, progress and at a high level, just professionalism looks like, for fun and in part leading into the 250th anniversary of the country. I've been listening to a biography on George Washington, and I didn't realize, but he lost all of his teeth. I mean, at one point he ended up having dentures, top and bottom, without even any teeth to anchor them to. And as I think about the dental profession evolving over time, I have zero fear of losing all of my teeth. I've got pretty good care. And yet when I think about it, the dentist isn't dedicating an entire day or multiple days to just looking at and treating me. I don't see the whites of my dentist's eyes for very long at all. The infrequent amount of time I'm there, he sees a whole lot of people, but the quality of the overall care is way better than it was, in a prior day, very analog, approach to, medical care. And I just don't see any reason that a lot of white collar knowledge work professionals, in real estate and in other spaces, can't increase both the quality and the quantity of the work that they're able to do. And we see that in examples with, dental and medical generally and that sort of thing. And to me, it seems like when responsibly applied, and of course that's critical. There's always the fear that somebody just overly relies on an answer that a chatbot spits out, right? And it's like, well, it says this, so that must be the answer. My dad was telling a story a number of years ago of somebody who just testing a software as a service software had spit out an answer. It's kind of one of these regression models that, well, this bathroom has a negative value. So they were tempted to, say that adding a bathroom decreased the value of the home because that's what the black box spit out. Sure. We always have to have the human judgment, tempered by whatever the uplift can be. But, assuming you've got that, the uplift can be really significant. And that's part of what really caught my eye about what your findings were in this process, that I'm not replacing anybody. It can do a lot, and it can drive productivity without compromising quality, and in some cases lifting it. But the key insight is, where can it be relied on and where can it not be relied on? What did you find? The 82% did really good, the 18%, and maybe that's lower now with a higher quality model. Where did you find that AI was really dropping the ball or letting you down and couldn't be relied on?
That's a good question. So we were able to develop multiple tools, and some of them were really great and some of them were not really great. I'll give you a couple of examples. One that was really great was what we call the engagement letter parser. And basically what the engagement letter parser would do is a new order would come into Pandora's inbox. She could then take and forward that to a dedicated email. Once it hit that email, we had a heartbeat set up on our OpenClaw system, is what we were using back then. I don't use OpenClaw anymore, but at the time we built the project on top of that harness. And what that would do is it would scan inbox, I think every 15 minutes. Once it saw that there was a new order, it would pull that order, and it didn't matter if it came from, it didn't matter if it was a private deal, if it was an AMC deal, if it was a local lender deal, it didn't matter. It could then look through and find borrower name, owner name, contact name, phone numbers, fee, tech fee, due date, you name it. All the things that you normally will take out of an engagement letter and put into your database, whatever database you're using. It could do that automatically, and it did it with almost 100% accuracy, no matter what the engagement letter was. Amazing, right? That was one that we say that was a huge success. We also had a tool where it would go out and it would start to build the data. So it would actually go out and it would search public records, for example. It would search whatever online public data was available for the subject itself. It would go out, it would find plat maps and download them. It would find the GIS and take a snapshot and download that. It would find zoning and the legal description and the owner name and prior sales and all of that, the stuff that we normally have to just slug through as human beings, and put that into a database, the work file, if you will, that then could be populated into the form filling software. It did that to about an 80% level. Meaning I think she covered, it was either 12 or 14 counties, and there were 2 that were very, very difficult just because they had, lockdowns. It wasn't that the tool was bad. It was that, when you go to a website, they don't want computers, bots, if you will, going into those websites. And consequently, it was hitting, blockages and sometimes just not being able to get the data. Never once that I remember did it pull the wrong data, which was also interesting. So it either was successful in pulling the data, or it was successful in pulling most of the data, or it was unsuccessful and couldn't pull the data at all. However, we were very, very vigilant, and I think this is the key here. We were very vigilant in making sure that we double-checked everything, right? That we're not just trusting. Some of the naysayers out there, when appraisers are, notoriously a little bit negative, are jumping on the forums on Facebook and other places and claiming, hey, I'm not going to ever use AI, and AI is scary, and AI, hallucinates and gives you the wrong answer. And, back to your story, Jeff, about your dad and the black box idea, folks, principles of appraising have never changed. AI is just a tool, and your signature still goes on that report. Right? So I use AI as a help. I do not use AI as a replacement.
Interesting. Okay. I got so many questions based on that response. The first is, so you probably wouldn't know, but Jeff and I several months ago spun up a podcast colleague through OpenClaw called TUG. Stands for Two Uninteresting Guys, which we sort of tagline at the beginning of these deals, and does a lot of fun things for us. So I heard you say that OpenClaw was what you used. We are considering some other projects with Hermes. What tools do you recommend right now? What are you leaning towards?
Yeah. So I'm going to give you an analogy. We were talking a little bit off air about homeschool. We homeschooled all 4 of our, my wife homeschooled all her 4 kids. If she listens to this, she'd slap me. You did not homeschool our kids. No, all the success and appreciation goes to her. But we homeschooled all of our 4 kids. And often the question that my wife would get was, well, what curriculum did you use? And they expected an answer of, oh, I use this one, or I use that one, or, we use this set of curriculum. And her answer was always, well, I mean, it depends. I use this for math, and this for science, and this for reading, and all of these different topics. She basically curated her own curriculum. So in answer to your question, there are some harnesses out there. I think we obviously mentioned OpenClaw. That was kind of the introduction, if you will, of the first kind of personalized AI harness. And that was really what spurred the idea of Project Prometheus, because finally I'm like, you know what, this is a structure that I can use. I found that, like a lot of people that have used OpenClaw, it can get very, very frustrating to use it. When I went away from it, I decided to look at Hermes. I looked at several others as well. And ultimately, my answer to the question of what am I using now is similar to what my wife said about curriculum. I'm using my own. I basically have, over the last several weeks, developed my own harness using Claude Code as the builder. So again, my wife gets the credit for homeschooling. Claude Code gets the credit for building this, but it was architected by me. I wanted to keep it simple. I wanted to avoid all of the pitfalls that OpenClaw brought, and bring some of the cool things that I wanted OpenClaw to do, but it couldn't. And so currently I'm using my own harness. I'm teaching other appraisers how to build their own harness. This is a harness that I own. And it's not run by any one model. Now, currently it's mostly connected to Anthropic. That's my model of choice right now. But I literally can have a conversation in the morning with Claude, and in the afternoon jump on Gemini and say, hey, remember the conversation we had this morning? I want to pick up now and further the conversation. And Gemini will know what I talked about in Claude because they're all tied to the same brain.
Very cool. That's, in just your path to getting this going, my advice all along, and it's come from how I've discovered all of this and how to jump in, because it's like how to go from zero to messing around with it when you have zero experience prior.
Right.
Claude Code was sort of the gateway for me. And it started with, hey, I'd like to do this personal thing. I got no idea how to start, but this is what I'd like to do, and said kind of the general concept. Said, well, you could do that. That's pretty complicated, but a great project. How about these two options? And then we were off to the races. Next thing I know, I'm in terminal and like DOS prompts and writing code, and I've got a live database and all of these things, but just through conversations with Claude.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's the key, right? So Mark, what you're describing is the biggest piece of advice I would have for appraisers, right? Is if you are unfamiliar, if AI is scary to you, if the word terminal makes you want to bury your head in the covers, which by the way, I'm still not very comfortable with terminal, right? But the idea here is just do it, right? Steal the Nike motto and just get in and you're not going to break anything, right? Get in and start playing with it. My biggest suggestion to people, if they hear the word harness, and first of all, what is a harness, right? So what is OpenClaw? What is Claude Code? My biggest recommendation for people who have not really done anything other than played around a little bit with ChatGPT, they've thrown questions at it, they've taken something they wrote and say, hey, rewrite it, make it better. These are all good things, right? Dip your toe in the water. But if you want to get into the world of agentic AI, my biggest suggestion is Manus, M-A-N-U-S. It is a harness that is kind of unbreakable and pretty amazing. I still use Manus today, even though I have my own harness, because of the power behind it. That is a great way to kind of just jump in the shallow end of the pool and start to experience what agentic AI looks like.
Yeah, boy, and it gives, experiencing some of these things, even like the statement that everybody hears is like, oh man, OpenClaw is burdensome. And maybe the longer you're at it, the more burdensome it gets. Living that provides depth to that kind of hyperbolic statement that you read headlines in. And this is like, I wouldn't have really been able to tell you much what terminal was before this. I can tell you confidently, I still can't use it without Claude, but I can accomplish things through it and Claude through me.
That's another key. If you don't mind me just pausing on that for a second, because I really want to emphasize that is, when people come to me and ask me questions, right? First of all, I'm no expert in AI. Yes, I spend hours a day building tools for appraisers in AI. And that's teaching me, and I'm growing and I'm learning, but I would still not consider myself to be an expert because I'm constantly asking AI, right? So when someone says, well, Dustin, how do you do this? My easiest answer is, well, I don't know, let's ask AI. I'm constantly building. If, like you said, when I'm in terminal, I've got terminal open here, I've got Claude chat over here, and I'm saying, okay, now this is what I'm seeing. I probably take, and this is not an exaggeration, I probably take over 100 screenshots a day where I'm constantly just taking a picture of what I'm seeing, throwing it in Claude Code and saying, hey, this is what I'm looking at now, help me out. Yesterday, I set up my first automation in Go High Level. Go High Level is a very powerful software, but it's also very complicated because it's powerful and you can get really in the weeds. What would take somebody who is expert at Go High Level about 5 minutes, right? Took me about an hour to do. And it was screenshot after screenshot after screenshot showing Claude Code what it is I'm doing. And it's saying, okay, this is how you fill this in. This is the check mark that you make. And that's the same way that I'm building everything with Claude Code. Is I'm constantly just asking Claude Code, this is what I want to build. In fact, if you don't mind, I'm just going to pause here and just say, the pattern that I see is the most successful. So this weekend, I'm actually meeting with about 16 appraisers in person in Salt Lake. And we've got an all-day building workshop on Saturday. And the main thing that I'm going to bring to the table is the model that I'm using. And the model is this. You use something like Sonnet, like a lower model to have a conversation, right? Sometimes the conversation is, hey, what should I build? I'm a real estate appraiser, and I want something that can be, effective for me. What should I build? And have this conversation that might lead to an idea, which we can then start to sketch out, again, a conversation, sometimes in voice mode. I love conversation mode, right? So we're just having this conversation back and forth. Okay, well, how would I build that? And what features would I want? Okay, let's yellow team that. And what am I missing here? Okay, now let's red team the whole thing, right? What are some big red flags here that we need to be looking at? Okay, now that we've got all this architect, now I want you to create the prompt that I'm going to put in Fable 5 and have it build, right? So I'm not using the high token list of Fable 5 to have that conversation. I build out the one-shot prompt here, pop it in Fable 5, and 5 minutes later, I have an amazing tool.
Hearing you describe that whole process resonates. I mean, same thing. I've copied and pasted a whole lot of screenshots, into Terminal from Terminal into Claude Code and back and forth. One of the things that I find, Dustin, and I'm curious about how you view this correlation or this relationship, but I'm not a programmer. I'm not a software engineer. I can do a lot of stuff with AI that I never would have thought of doing without AI. Without Claude there helping me, I wouldn't be doing a lot of these things. And your comment that somebody who was expert in Go High Level could do something in about 5 minutes that took you an hour to do, you could both get there, but it took a lot longer because of the back and forth, help needed rather than having the core knowledge yourself. It seems to me that there's a relevant parallel between that and what appraisers and even real estate professionals, zooming out a little bit, experience. I read a New York Times article where a reporter wanted to sell his house without the use of an agent, only relying on AI, eventually got there, but didn't really know what he didn't know in the process. And I think was much more cumbersome than had a real estate agent or professional been involved in the process. What's your looking forward? How much value is there in the expertise that an appraiser or real estate professional, selling or doing mortgages or whatever? What's the value that they bring to the table versus a novice who's leaning on AI, but still doesn't know what they don't know, if that makes sense?
It does make sense. And going back to our previous conversation about, I'm not letting any of my staff go. I'm promoting them to, AI engineer, promoting them to AI director within the business. As a little side hobby, I run a business up in Montana. It's a little visitor-friendly farm outside Glacier National Park. We're talking about a farm with real animals, right? And the number one job criteria that I now have when I'm screening applicants to work there is, how much do you use AI? Okay, these are people that are coming to the farm to work on a farm, and I'm asking them if they're using AI. And if they're not, I'm not looking heavily at them, meaning this is changing the world. And the reason I ask that question is I want innovators. I want people who will leverage technology to help them to be more efficient, more effective at their job. And the same is true with really any business. And of course, to your question, real estate appraising. I'm looking in front of me at the 11 tools that we built out with Project Prometheus that I have on my GitHub. 11 tools that I could not have built without AI. I have never written a line of code in my life. I probably never will write a line of code in my life. I'm going back and forth with AI, and it is building for me. It's writing that code for me, right? Software has not changed in the sense that you still have JSON, you still have Python, you still have these languages, but I'm not writing them. Claude Code is writing them. And as you start to learn how to do that, meaning I'm not giving you the software, I'm not giving you a fish, I'm teaching you how to fish so that you can imagine anything in the world and then dig that up. Now, to your question, I think is more about what I call the local expert or the local guide, right? I don't think that appraisers are going away. I do, and I've said this publicly, I do believe there's going to be need for less appraisers in the future, but there's going to be need for better appraisers in the future. And that means appraisers that are leveraging AI. There's still going to be a need for people to come, whether it be a real estate agent or a real estate appraiser. People buyers, right, or users of our services still don't just want a computer. They want people that understand the ins and outs of the market, that understand that Jackson Hole, Wyoming is different than Idaho Falls, Idaho, that understand the difference between this subdivision or this school district and that school district. I think that is going to be actually a bigger part of what we do in the future, not a lesser part. Again, AI is not replacing any of these people. They are elevating us to the local expert.
Dustin, how much do you think? I think when most people hear that, they might think that you are specifically referencing completing an appraisal.
Mm-hmm.
I imagine you also mean the business of appraisal, in marketing your services, reaching people in a different way. I assume that's the case. What is your view on it?
I'm so glad you brought that up because, yeah, we've talked a lot today about the tools that help us to, to complete appraisals better. And again, I want to reiterate, right? We're not having AI do the appraisal, right? Can AI choose comps pretty well? Actually, yeah, it can do it pretty well. Can it support adjustments pretty well? Yeah, it can do it. I spun up a tool a couple of days ago, a regression analysis tool that 3 years ago I could have sold commercially. It's that good. I have no desire to get in the software world and sell anything. I'm just using it internally, but I'm using these tools to help support me as an appraiser. But there's another part of this as well. And some of the things that we're doing in the AI, the Appraiser AI architect side is we're building tools to help us to market, to run our businesses. So we've got a tool, for example, that's a profit and loss statement reviewer. Right. This is a process that I go through monthly. I sit down with my P&L. What's coming in, what's going out, where are we at, what are the ratios now as compared to last year this time or last month, and how do I make decisions as a business owner moving forward? Now, notice something. That's not changing with AI. It used to take me about an hour to analyze the P&L. It now takes me about a minute. Okay, so that means I can spend the next 59 minutes actually making decisions, not getting the data ready and prepared, but actually, here's the data, here's what it says. Now, what do you want to do with it? That's the way that AI can help support. The other day, I tied my Claude code directly to Meta, right? So, and this is with the farm, this isn't with appraisal, but the principle applies, right? We're running ads on Facebook and Instagram. I don't have a clue if they're working, right? We're busier, people are coming in. And then I found out you can take Claude Code, you can tie it through a connector to Meta, and it's Meta, it's pixels. And now I can trace. So anybody that sees my ad and goes through the process of going to my website, going to the ticketing and hitting checkout and actually paying me money, I can now, down to the penny, say it cost me this much to run this ad. This is the results. Any appraiser can do that as well. AI is speeding up not just appraisal work, but the business of running an appraisal office.
Amen. You slipped something in at the very beginning of this discussion that I want to make sure that we get back to, and it applies to a story of a mortgage underwritten that Jeff and I covered a little while back. This article came out. I'm sure you wrote it 30 plus days ago. I don't know how long, 2 weeks ago it was published, whatever it was. So a lot of time has passed, not a lot, but in AI world, a lot of time has passed.
If it was yesterday, a lot of times has passed.
Yeah, exactly. We have Grok 4.5 now.
Right.
Figure out what that means. So
yeah.
But, you had said 82% was the amount of successful processing in Project Prometheus, but that probably would be 90 or 95% today.
Yeah.
So Jeff and I had discussed on Market Moves a few episodes ago a mortgage. There was a story about a mortgage that had been underwritten. A lot of AI tools had been applied to this particular lender, and they underwrite this mortgage by accident entirely from AI. There was no human that inserted themselves in the loop.
Wow.
And it made all the right decisions, not necessarily the kind of a surprising point to the story, I think, but it is that the better this stuff gets, the less subconscious incentive the human who's designed to be in the loop in the process feels that they need to be there. And so,
right.
So if we've gone from 82 to 95 or whatever the numbers are, and we soon get to 99.9, and then we have that march of nines where it's getting closer to 100%. I just wonder your thoughts on how we keep ourselves in the loop as that necessary step.
Yeah, it's a good question. And the way I'm going to answer that is to break down what I mean by the 82 versus the 92 versus, I'll use your 99.9. In fact, I'm going to just call it 100, right? We're going to get to the point eventually that it will be 100%. Now, what do I mean by that? That does not in any way mean that 100% we're replacing the appraiser. What I mean by that is, let's go back to the tool that I told you about. This is the county scraper is what we call it, the county scraper. So you've got 123 any street that you're appraising, and our tool could go out, and if it's in Clark County, I'm just hypothetically making a county up. It's in Clark County. It would go out and it could get all of the information that you need for the work file, at least on the county website, right? There's other places and other things it needs to gather as well, but let's call it 100% of the data it could get from Clark County. But what about Jefferson County, right? Jefferson County has roadblocks, and it has CAPTCHAs, and it won't allow that bot to get through. Well, that's what I mean by the 82%, right? Meaning we couldn't use the tool 100% of the time to get the data that we need. Okay. Now notice something. I didn't say that 82% of the time the appraiser is replaced. I'm saying that 82% of the time the tool that the appraiser was using worked properly. I think that now with some of these advanced models, we're closer to 95%. I think it will be very quickly. I hate to put a timeline on it, but I'd say by the end of the year, we're probably going to have powerful enough models that we can say it and it can be done, right? If I want a tool and I'm schooled in how to use AI, I can get to the point that 100% of the time those tools work, but they're still tools, right? 100% of the time this Casio works for me, but it's still a tool. I still have to make the ultimate decisions, and I don't think that's ever going away. I don't think we're going to get to the point that 100% appraisers are going to be replaced. I think that we're going to have tools that work 100% of the time, and now we use our best judgment to still make those decisions that allow us to put our wet signature on those reports and say, this was done by an expert, not by a computer.
I think that's such a nuanced but critical perspective on that, Dustin. And the temptation is always, from the office manager you're talking to, well, this is doing everything I can do, that's going to replace me, to the professional themselves, the appraiser, saying, well, I don't want to be replaced if AI can calculate and pick comps and do all of these things. But I think, at least to me, that resonates. The proper framing is, the tools are getting better. They're at our disposal. And I think there's, some kind of incumbent requirement on us to be creative and willing to test and try and learn. I mean, go through this process that you've been describing, that Mark and I have been experiencing, in order to understand what even is possible. And it can be a creative collaborator too. What should I be asking about or thinking about? I've had those conversations, and they lead to interesting places. One of the interesting things that I observed recently is we've got a team member who was using an AI agent to build some software. And my assumption before understanding what he was doing was that he was inserting agents to operate in this, this kind of QC role that he was building out. What I came to discover, though, was that he was using an agent to help write the software that was ultimately what was doing the QC. It wasn't inserting an agent, but the logic, and it made sense to me, was I can build the software in a way that I couldn't before, but the software is much less expensive to use. I'm not using tokens and running AI models if I have a software solution that works. And so
right.
the nuanced approach there, made sense. As we think about this AI evolution, I remember when ChatGPT first came out, it was trained, up through a couple of years back, like you couldn't ask it anything current, it's like,
right.
It's kind of cool, but it's not all that practical. It's certainly evolved a ton since then. I'm going to show you a chart, Dustin. I'd love your reaction to kind of, with your lived experience, this Gartner, hype cycle of, something gets visibility and you get peak inflated expectations. We get super excited about it. And that was kind of a GPT moment. The funniest part in all of this to me is the trough of disillusionment. I think that you deal with problems and you're like, well, this doesn't like solve all the problems at a single prompt. I mean, this isn't just an easy button for everything that I want it to do. And then eventually you understand, how does it work? How do I apply it? it leads to greater levels of productivity. What's your thought, or where would you rate us in this, particular cycle as it relates to artificial intelligence?
Yeah, it's a good question. I love this chart. And just to speak to it quickly, I think there's a lot of individuals and let's just say appraisers that are currently still, I believe, in this trough of disillusionment. I alluded to it earlier with, when you get online and whether it be Facebook forums or some other aspect, or, in-person class. I've been to conferences recently and had private conversations with appraisers who are not members of my group, who know that I'm teaching AI and this, that, and the other, and are quite well, they're in that trough of disillusionment. Let's put it that way. I saw somebody post the other day who was saying, I'm going to put a disclaimer on my report that says no AI was used in this report. And there were some appraisers that kind of challenged him and said, what's that going to accomplish? And I would say that that's akin to somebody in 1997 saying no internet was used in the development of this report, right? I mean, we're going to get to the point, folks. And by the way, I find it funny that he's posting it on Facebook and probably doesn't know that a lot of AI was used in his ability to post that. He doesn't even know he's using AI when he's using AI. But we're moving into this world of where AI is just going to be a part of our lives, whether it be the appraisal lives or our day-to-day lives. It just is. I'm currently being driven around by AI. My wife and I recently bought a Tesla, and daily I'm being driven by. The other day we went on a date, and I said, "Do you want me to drive?" And she goes, do you want to sit in the driver's seat?" Sure, I'll be the one sitting in the driver's seat, right? Where are we currently, to your question, Jeff? I think that the plateau of productivity is there for most of us. Many of us are past the trough of disillusionment. Not that we don't have days that are like that, right? There are days that I spend 6 to 8 hours in front of a computer, and my wife and I are having dinner, and she goes, "Well, how was your day?" And I said, "That was good." "Were you busy?" "I was busy." "Did you get anything accomplished?" "I have no idea," right? And that can be, a bit of disillusionment. But I think for the most part, as you start to learn how, and that's the key here, right? How to use AI, not just to use it, but learn how to use it. You're finding more and more productivity, right? Just get in, use it, practice with it. And what we're finding is less and less people are in that trough of disillusionment, and more people are finding themselves in the plateau of productivity. And it's only going to get better, right? These models are getting better and better and better. They are hallucinating less. They are failing less. That's why I say, Project Prometheus, we ended that, several weeks ago, and literally in just a couple of weeks, right? We've gone to where I would predict that if we redid Project Prometheus today, we would be more at a 92%. It's that gap is only going to close as time gets moving and the technology gets better.
That makes a lot of sense, Dustin. And I mean, there are times when I feel like I'm, maybe in this slope of enlightenment trying to get to productivity, meaning how do I get something that actually is tangible or measurable? You've described a whole bunch of projects and things that have led to that, that productivity, actual lift and gain. And so I think, individually, people can vary anywhere along there, but I think as in terms of the state of the art with the technology, it's definitely leading to productivity. And then the question then is, am I willing to pluck that low-hanging fruit and take advantage of it or not? But right. That really resonated as I thought back around what was it like when this first came out, and how has it evolved, and the pace of change is just mind-blowing. We've talked about that a lot with new model comes out, and it's just significantly better even still. And this is, a year or two after Elon said that AI has already eaten the internet or consumed everything that was there. And we're still making meaningful, moves forward with what, the models can do. And I think it just leads to, I totally agree, increased precision, increased reliability. I don't think it leads to elimination of human labor and productivity and need, but it makes life better. I mean, if you're able and willing to, integrate it responsibly.
Yeah, that's a big if, though, Jeff. There's still a lot of individuals, appraisers included, who are dealing with a lot of fear when it comes to AI. who are, who are saying things like, well, if I refuse to use AI, then AI can't take my job over. And I would just say, maybe it's time to think about things a little bit differently. How can you harness the power of AI to make your job better, to make it more efficient, to make it more effective, and make the quality higher, right? AI is constantly being blamed for low quality, right? People think, well, if I rely on AI, I'm just going to get slop. I'm just going to get stuff that I can't trust. And I would say that if you are willing to learn AI, really understand how it works and how to make it work, right? This is where you get the increased efficiency along with the increased quality.
Yeah, you bet. The men and women in the arena is kind of what I think about with this is that, there's a lot of people on the sidelines that don't have consequence to whatever decision. They're kind of opining on what's happening here one way or another. And appraisers particularly, are just right in the thick of this. And I think if you're turning a blind eye to the changes, it is a very fearful place to be in that arena and feel overmatched, or that there is an expiration date on your relevance. But jumping into Claude Code and with the most, I did a family budget thing, I don't know, 10 months ago. That was the first project. It was just a private thing. I had needed a simple solution, and it was just starting there. But to be in the arena in taking control over your future or commanding the change that is coming, and having deep understanding of it is just so empowering. And it seems like you're leading folks to do that. It's certainly our message here with Market Moves.
Yeah, if I could just opine a little bit on what you're saying there, Mark, and just to use another analogy, my number. So in 1996 is when I became a trainee. So I just celebrated 30 years of being an appraiser, and my number one, or my first class ever that I took as an appraiser, it was not appraisal basics or the foundations. It was USPAP. The 15-hour USPAP was my first class. Now, I was in this class with about 30 other, mostly gentlemen, mostly elderly. I think there was one or two, females in there, and maybe one or two individuals that were under 40, right? And then there was me, 23-year-old kid sitting in a USPAP class. And as you can imagine, the class basically just became a conversation with a bunch of veterans of the experiences they had as an appraiser, and throwing out terms and technologies and definitions and laws and regulations and all that. I was so overwhelmed with not just USPAP, but the whole idea of becoming a real estate appraiser. It looked unsurmountable. Now, today, you put me in a USPAP class, and I'm one of the old guys sitting there talking about, whatever it is, and feeling very comfortable with the terminology and the definitions, the regulations, and everything else. Not that I know everything about USPAP, of course I don't, but I feel very comfortable because I've learned appraising. I've learned how to apply USPAP to appraising, right? And this idea of being an appraiser is not overwhelming to me. You throw an appraisal problem at me, and I feel very confident that I can, accomplish what needs to be accomplished. The same is true with AI. Most of us are sitting in that classroom right now being overwhelmed by the YouTubers out there and the experts out there and the news stories and the anecdotal stories that they hear about AI, and it's overwhelming, and it brings a lot of fear, right? It seems like it's this giant box that's impossible to learn. And I'm telling you, folks, it is so, I'm not going to call it easy, but doable, right? If you get into it, you find a teacher, whether that teacher is an individual or YouTube or Claude, right? Can be your mentor, can be your coach, and learn how to use this and start to leverage it. That's when you start to say, you know what, this is doable, right? How do you eat an elephant? Well, you don't, because they taste nasty, by the way. But it's the old analogy. You just got to take it a little bit at a time.
Yeah, that resonates 100%, Dustin. I appreciate you diving in on that. And that's one of the things that, in the long time that I've been following you, that we've been friends, that I've really appreciated, is your desire to seek out truth and understanding, and then how do we apply it? How do we make it actionable? And I know that you've iterated over the years, with what you're doing, but as we get close to wrapping up here. Would just love to have you, tell the audience what it is you have going on in this vein of learning AI. What do you have that's available to people that are maybe at the place you're describing of don't know where to jump in, but would sure like to collaborate with some peers? I
appreciate that. It's a nice toss for a shameless plug. So I spend literally average 6 hours a day in AI. Some days it's 12 hours, some days it's 4, but I would say about 6 hours a day that I'm spending building, learning, growing with AI. And it is super overwhelming. My goal right now is to take and ingest that information, to be the guinea pig, if you will, to fail multiple times, but to learn it and then disseminate to others. And I do that in a couple of different ways. Of course, we've always had our all-star team for years and years and years, and that has not changed. The all-star team is there for people who want to, build stronger, more successful businesses. And of course, we're talking about AI in there. But we now have a couple of different options out there for people who really want to learn and utilize AI. One of them, of course, is the Appraiser AI Academy. That is an online learning circle, if you will. A think tank where we can come together a couple of times a month for some show and tell, for some teaching, for some Q&A, for some, hey, Dustin, I'm stuck. Help me to get past this roadblock. There's a private community there where appraisers are able to, discuss with one another, to show what they're learning, to share the tools that they have developed. And that's been very successful. And then we also have what's called the Appraiser AI Architects, which has been modeled after the Dream Team. The Dream Team is a in-person mastermind that I've run for over 15 years, where we meet together in a physical location, usually by a major airport, for a full day of working on your business. Well, now we've attached to that a full day of working in AI. So these appraisers are coming, they're flying into Las Vegas, and we're meeting at a hotel, and we're at a boardroom with a table in front of us and high-speed internet, and they have their laptops open, and we are building together in a workshop environment. And as a consequence, what we're finding is that appraisers are being less overwhelmed. They're starting to take this back and actually develop tools. And back to what I said earlier, if you can think it, you can build it. This is what Replit used to say, right? And it drove me nuts because when I first started with Replit, I had this idea, well, I can think of a lot of things. And if Replit can build it, that's great. And I failed and failed and failed. And I thought, well, that's a stupid model. That's not working. We're getting there. We really are. If you think you can build it, you can build it. And that's what's happening over and over again with our membership groups. And I'm just learning as much as I can, ingesting as much as I can, and then disseminating to individuals who are willing to listen.
Well, I really appreciate that summary, Dustin. And it's just one of those things where when you get together with a willingness and almost an appetite to learn and to experiment and test, good things come out of it, do whatever the format and that sort of thing. So I encourage anybody to check you out, to get more involved. It really does help. I find there are some that are kind of these renegades or mavericks that want to just go and do things on their own and learn. But I think more people are comfortable with some collaboration, with some hand holding or some suggesting or some coaching and guidance. And there's plenty of, opportunity for that in a lot of what you do. And I find that success, isn't usually out of the gates, but it's through that failing and learning to fail fast and then learn as you go. And the success inevitably comes. So been a lot of fun to have you on and discuss here. Mark, any concluding thoughts that you have before we wrap?
Dustin Harris, friend of the pod. Glad we can say that now. Really glad you came on, and look forward to maybe doing this again sometime.
I would love to. Anytime, guys. Mark, thank you. Jeff, thank you for the invite. It's been a pleasure being here. If anybody has questions, they don't need to be a member of my group, right? My goal is to help appraisers, and if they want to reach out to me, email me, the coach at theappraisercoach.com. I would love to help. If you're stuck, if you're scared, if you don't know where to go when it comes to AI, again, let me be the guinea pig. Let me fail hard, so that you don't have to.
Don't be mad if I email you about some free tickets to an animal farm in Montana.
They are waiting at the gift shop for you, my friend.
I think that might be a job application Mark's sending over, Dustin. So
we'll get you slopping the pigs really quick.
There you go. All
It'll be
right.
good work for him.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. The Appraiser Coach.
Thanks, guys.